Hey guys, what's up? It's Deprimido. Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm here in FL Studio and I've got this jazz sample that I made and I'm going to show you guys how to make it. So I kind of wanted to go for like an old, sampled type of jazz melody. So you want to first pick out kind of what sort of instruments you might want to use. So I used a regular piano, a Rhodes piano, a saxophone, a bass guitar, and a drum kit. You can use stuff like that. You can also use lots of different mallets and bell type of sounds, as well as lots of different horns. Pretty much anything realistic. You could also do guitars, stuff like that. So starting with kind of the main part of this melody, I made these chords. I used Mini Grand, which is a fairly cheap piano plugin. It's made by the same people as Expand, and I just used the first preset, the real piano. So it's mostly just these chords as well as these little top notes right here, and it sounds like this. So when you're making these jazzy chords, there's a few things that you want to do. You want to use a lot of extended chords, which means sevenths, ninths, you can even do 11ths and 13ths. So if you don't know what that is, when you're forming a chord, for example, this beat is in the key of B minor. So we can make a regular B minor chord, which would be this right here. So basically you can see I've got the scale highlighting turned on and we're just skipping each note. So then to add a seventh, you would just skip a note and put one there. To add a ninth, you'd skip a note and put one there. For an 11th, right there, and a 13th would be right there. And that's how you make an extended chord. It's the same as a regular chord. Then another thing that's important, this is kind of a trope of jazz music, is that there's some notes out of key. So you don't want to do a ton of these, but you kind of can. So the best place to put them is just 1/2 step off where they would normally be in key. So for example, this would be the third right here normally, but I just moved it up one to G sharp instead of G, and it sounds pretty good. So you can experiment with that. Don't do too many of them, and you'll know when it sounds good and when it doesn't, and it's not going to sound good most of the time, so be kind of careful with them. Then I also just added this little top melody right here. I shortened this note so that it's staccato, and I did that so that instead of sounding like this, it sounds like this. It's just a little bit more plucky. And then finally, I just pressed Alt-R to randomize the notes and Alt-S to strum the notes. As you can see right here, I did a slightly different strum on each chord so that it doesn't always sound the same. Some of them are a bit more intense than others. But yeah, I just pressed Alt-R and Alt-S to do that, randomized the velocity and the panning a little bit, and that's about it for the chords. Then for effects, I threw RC20 on this. I made just a preset right here, a little bit of noise, Final 1, a little bit of wobble and distortion and magnetic, and just a tiny bit of reverb, not too much. Also, turn up the follow just to about like 6 or 7%, and that way it won't just constantly be playing noise. It'll kind of turn off when the sound stops playing. Then I made this bass line. I used Purity because that has a really good bass guitar section. There's also plenty of other VSTs you can use. Flex has some good ones, which is a FL Studio stock plugin if that's all you're working with. But you just need any bass guitar pretty much. Also Spitfire Labs has some really good ones. So this is the pattern that I made. So one thing you can see that I did a lot here is I just cut each note a little bit before the next one hits because this guitar doesn't have a lot of attack. And so if you were to have it like this compared to this, it's just much less clear where each note hits, and that makes it a lot less bouncy, which why would you ever want that? For the most part, I just followed the root notes of the chords, obviously not entirely because that would be pretty boring. Then we've also got these little flams here. You don't have to do that. I just thought it sounded kind of nice, but you don't have to do it. And then also I just moved some of the notes around just a little bit to make sure that they're not entirely on time because that just adds to the realistic feel. I also randomized the velocity as well as the panning a little bit, and I didn't do any effects on the bass. After that, I added this saxophone here. I got it out of Expand in the brass and woodwind section. It sounds like this. So as you can hear, pretty simple pattern. It's really just a very simple rhythm, especially just half notes here, and then just kind of a swing pattern right here. Pretty simple. Then because it's also simple, it sounds kind of dry, so we added a few effects. First off, we did RC20. I turned off the noise, gave it quite a bit of reverb, and just a little bit over here. This was just the Vinyl 2 preset at first, but I changed some stuff around. Then I added an EQ to cut out some of the lows and the highs. That just makes it sound a little bit more vintage. And then we also added a reverb here. This is the settings. I don't want to go too into depth with it, but pretty simple. After all the effects, it sounds like this. As you can hear, it's very atmospheric and kind of spacey, but it's also got quite a bit of presence, and so it just fits in really well. Next, I just added a Rhodes Piano. I just used the one out of FL keys because I like the way that sounds personally. Again, a really simple pattern. You kind of want to do it similarly to the saxophone pattern. It sounds like this. Again, we just randomized it to make it a little bit more natural. But other than that, there's not too much we did. Now, one thing, since we've got multiple different full counter melodies going, you want to make sure that they're not in each other's pockets. So you want to kind of have them playing separately at different times. Otherwise, it'll get kind of muddy and it'll kind of throw off the bounce. So I'm going to play this along with the saxophone so that you can hear how I did that. So you can hear the Rhodes starts right after the saxophone finishes. You can also see I just copied the second part of the melody from the saxophone right here onto the Rhodes, and I think it just gives it a nice little contrast. And then finally, I just added some drums. I used FPC here, which is just a FL Studio stock drum pad, and I just used this HQ Jazz kit because it's got some nice jazz sounds. So this is the drum pattern that I made. So as you can see, very simple. We've just got a snare on 3 pretty much, and then another one on the 4 of the third bars. Just a simple hi-hat. We added a little bounce note right here. Then I've got an open hat on the last snare of the pattern. We've just got a little floor tom right here to add to the bounce a bit. Then just a pretty simple kick pattern, and then some rim shots right here. So just play around with this a little bit and eventually you'll get a pattern that sounds good. This one took me a while, so just play around with it and you'll get something that sounds good. Then for effects, I wanted it to really sit in the background, so I just compressed it a bit to glue everything together, and then I threw Fruity Love Filter on it. This is what it sounds like. Again, we've just got it randomized with the velocity and the panning. Also, there's not really an option in FL Studio, as far as I know, to do this, but you can kind of just move some of the notes slightly off the grid, and that'll give it a more realistic feel. Then I also just turned it down quite a bit so that it's not super in your face while we're listening to the sample. So with all that said, this is how the sample sounds. So yeah guys, that's pretty much it. Thank you all for watching. Also, I'm going to be giving this melody to the first person to comment, so definitely go do that and just leave your Instagram in the comment and I'll send it to you. But yeah, thank you all for watching. I really appreciate it. But yeah guys, make sure to go follow me on Instagram. I'm dropping a free MIDI kit when I reach 2,000 followers, and I'm also dropping a free loop kit when I reach 200 subscribers here on YouTube, which we're less than 10 away from, so definitely go subscribe. But yeah, thank you all for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll talk to you all in the next video.